And thanks for staying with us here on Breakfast Central on News Central. We're broadcasting live from Lagos, Nigeria, to the world. And we are starting off with our very first paper this morning. It's the Daily Independent. That's what we're going to. And but let's start off with the Daily Trust first, before we go straight to the Daily Independent, to ensure that we can take a look at the big stories. If you're just tuning in, thank you so much for staying with us. The front page of the Daily Trust is what we're going to start off. It says, how attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque, others triggered crisis. This is for the East conflict.
All right, that of course is the Israel-Palestinian conflict. We have experts flay Israel's occupying power. Palestinian envoy wants Israel forced to obey international laws. Israeli ambassador fingers Iran as US offers warships and aircrafts. And AU, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, others urge ceasefire as death toll hits 1,000. That's the update on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Here in Nigeria, Bayelsa, Imo, Kogi polls, spate of violence, insecurity worrisome, according to INEC. Pengassan confirms return of fuel subsidy. What does this mean for Nigeria, especially when we heard a few months ago that subsidy is gone? Flood destroys houses, farms in Taraba. Adamawa residents seek help. That's all that we have on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. Let's head over to our next paper. And on the front page of the next paper this morning is, of course, the Daily Independent.
Most definitely, Daily Independent is that paper. Let's take a look at that story. Technology insider abuse fraud enablers in banks. Fraud enablers in banks. You might want to read this story. I was opportune to get a glimpse of the story, though I didn't read all of it. But I found out that it says as of June 2023, the banking industry lost 12.2 billion naira to electronic payment fraud. Olive, 12.2 billion naira was lost by the bank to the banking industry as a result of electronic payment fraud. A development that is described as something that is very, very worrisome. So sometimes what baffles me more is when they take I had an account, I'm not going to mention the bank, where sometimes I'll sit at home and then I will get an alert, 2 naira is taken off, 7 naira is taken off, and then after 7 naira is taken off my account, I get a refund of 3 naira. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, is my account now to be played with, where 5 naira is taken, 2 naira is returned, 10 naira is taken for nothing, with some ridiculous names, so to say. But then again, you might want to read this story. It's very deep. I'm sure it will give you a second thought and help you pay more attention to your accounts. Bear prices bubbling up from this week. Page 6 has that story. You might want to read it. Serap asks court to stop Akpabio others from collecting pensions. Page 29. Did you know that, of course, the former governor of Akwa Ibom State, and of course, do remember that he was the boss, and now he's the Senate president. Of course, there are pensions upon pensions. What is Serap asking for? You might want to read about it. It's something that you would indeed wonder about too. NDLA arrests 67-year-old for ingesting 100 wraps of cocaine. Page 7 has that story. Tinubu administration will harness Kogi natural resources, Shatima says. And Israel declares war with Hamas as battle continues. Death toll soars. That story is there. Final one from me. INEC worries over violence ahead of Bayelsa, Imo, Kogi, Guba polls.
But I thought they said they had it under control, that they're planning, of course, for the mock elections that would happen, and then they're assuring us that they're putting modalities in place to ensure that the security doesn't get out of hand.
Well, there's a new one twist to that while they're also worrying. They're saying there's no deadline extension for uploading of polling agents, after October 10. So all polling agents, tomorrow is your last day. Make sure you do that. But then again, how are they going to undo the violence? But,
All right.
Final story.
Let's move away from the Daily Independent newspaper to our next paper, The Guardian. We have war in Middle East may spiral and push monthly petrol subsidy to 644.8 billion naira. Wow. Atiku Keyamo trade words over Tinubu's Chicago certificate, and the drama goes on. Remember, right after this newspaper review, we of course will be having journalist David Hundain joining us to explore that conversation even further. Wema Bank rewards winners of Hackaholics. All right, congratulations. 107 ex-senators urge caution on Tinubu certificate saga. And we have here, Tinubu pledges 500,000 jobs as Ajaokuta Steel nears completion. These are Ajaokuta Steel.
These are Ajaokuta Steel, eh?
The steel has still been,
It's been
stealing.
It's still waiting completion.
500,000 jobs. Let's see how that goes. And let's see when the steel, Ajaokuta Steel will actually be completed. Naira Deep pushes loan book value of 8 banks to 30 trillion naira. Execute one project every quarter, Lagos Speaker tells council chairman. That's all the stories that we can take this morning on the front page of the Guardian newspaper. Let's head over to our next paper.
All right, our next paper is The Punch. And it's time for us to punch what the stories are on the front pages. Let's start off from the top there. It says, Governors, Labour begin talks over 35,000 naira wage award. 35,000 naira wage award.
I don't know how to feel exactly about this.
Quite indifferent.
So it's one thing for us to have these numbers, another thing for them to actually be able to pay. I also want to find out what the details of the meeting with Labour, organized Labour and the government is, what the conclusions have come to, because what we've seen is they threaten strike, the government will call them into a meeting, they'll have a meeting, and it would seem that, the meeting or the feedback from the meeting it's not strong enough or doesn't hold water. Or there'll be promises that will be made that will not be kept, and then there'll be another threat to go on strike. I would hope that they can just resolve the drama surrounding a petrol subsidy, the really terrible way of life, or the really increasingly high cost of living for Nigerians. And then they can talk about the wages, the minimum wage, and start to not just talk about these things, start to put it into effect. Nigerians have lived on promises. It's been like all our lives, it's been promises upon promises upon promises. Why a number of people were not very excited by the president's speech on the 63rd independence of Nigeria, because it just felt like these same promises we've been hearing year in, year out. We want to actually see action.
But one of the promises there is what many people are worried about, which is that strong statement, subsidy is gone.
Well,
we've seen the impact. The impact has spiraled into seeing 35,000 naira wage reward or award. But then again, bear in mind, it's for 6 months. And just to backtrack on what you said, the Labour actually went into an agreement and they came up with a communique and it was signed, and it's actually the first that they're putting into law. So in other words, it's going to the court where the federal government and Labour would have a communique that's been signed, of course, under the, if you want to call it the jurisdiction, or better still, under the court. And then should anything go wrong, then that's where I think Olive's point is, what will happen if they don't hold on to their statement. 6 months, by the way, take note, that money is for 6 months. After 6 months, it's back to reality. 1,000 killed as Israeli-Hamas conflict rages. US deploys ammunitions. That's the story. Page 29. Let's take another one very quickly. The front page there. CBN investigator probes banks over 1.27 trillion naira intervention funds. So let me give you a more insight into this story very quickly. 1.27 trillion naira anchor borrowers loans, others undisbursed in 5 banks. So the story is some other banks were disbursing this intervention funds, while other banks were just not doing so, but it was on record that it was disbursed. So where did that money go to? Special investigator to summon bank CEOs of intervention funds. Are we going to see heads roll from CEOs who are actually in charge of banks? Because like one of the guests had actually said, who had joined us on the station, whatever the former CBN governor is actually going through in custody or in detention, someone has said it will come down to the CEOs of the banks. Well, anyway, Sanwo-Olu orders demolition of markets built on drainage. You can see the pictures there, very sad. And I must use this opportunity because I've been waiting for this opportunity to say this. If you go around Lagos, you would find that there are many houses built on drainages, even canals, which is very sad. One of the reasons why you would find Lagos that become flooded, especially when it rains or drizzles, aside from the fact that we are also a problem to the society, eating and throwing things outside of the car, so much, blocking the drainages and likes. Let's wrap things up very quickly this morning. Federal government, that's what it says. It says federal government grill NPower consultants, plans 5 million jobs. Road crashes deaths dropped by 1,118, says FRSC. I can tell you why the road crashes deaths would also drop. Like, a lot of people are not driving. That's one of the reasons, out of many. But then again, caution is still needed. Pension in 2.4 trillion naira deficit before reforms, Pencom DG says. Pretty much that's all we can take on the front pages of the papers this morning, having gone through the Punch, Daily Trust, Daily Independent, and of course the Guardian. But if you permit me, Olive, if you take a look at Daily Independent, if we can have that on the screen quickly before we go on a break. One story we forgot to take in the Daily Independent is federal government suspends NPower scheme, begins its audit. That's the top right there. Federal government finally suspends NPower scheme, begins its audit. And many Nigerians have called for the review of the so-called NPower.
Well, we did have the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation join us on the show some weeks, I think 2 weeks ago, and she talked about exactly. She talked about the NPower, the work that's been done, how they had noticed a lot of lapses, so much money had gone down the drain because there were people who were receiving more than they should have, while some were not receiving. And she'd given us till January. She said Nigerians should give her till January, that there's a cleanup exercise going on at the moment. And after the cleaning up, those who are yet to be paid will be paid. So fingers crossed, let's see how that eventually turns out.
This is a good question to ask, especially for all those who are indeed watching us on social media. Have you ever been a beneficiary of either of these government intervention funds? Well,